state. You unlock the doors that we've bolted in there, and they're full of horrible mangy things that would make Linda go, "Ew!" or worse. Because this building still is in a process of being made. It's being built into something for a purpose. Can I tell you that if you've ever had the idea of doing a building project, that is a borrowed idea. You are not the originator of it. Because the building project is by God. In fact, it would be fair to say that he did a building project, then a rebuilding project. He did sort of, a grand designed makeover, cosmic edition, when he said, "I'm going to build for myself a people." And the centre of all his buildings projects is not difficult to remember. It is always his presence with his people. Did you know that you were made to be a knower of God, to dwell in fellowship with him? And to help us, because we're stupid and sometimes a bit slow, he gave us some big pictures of what that would look like. Okay, so where's click up the first one, click up one, there we go. So way back when God appointed Israel to be his nation, he rescued them out from slavery, and he gave them something to build. He gave them, I was about to say, do you know what it's called? But it's sort of got it written up there now, hasn't it? It's called the Tabernacle. And what it was it's just like a mighty tent. And there were all the Israelites in their tribes on the north, south, east and west, and there was this designated area, and inside the sort of outer tent was the inner tent, and in that inner tent there was a section called the Holy of Holies where God dwelt. Now what's the problem about getting in? It's closed. You can't knock on the front, there's no doorbell. And if you did press the doorbell, you would be sent packing unless you were one of the priests, or unless you were the high priest, you didn't get into the main thing. So it's a sense in which, from when God first calls a people, he is in his people, but separated from them, and not quite with them. Okay, and then fast forward about 500 years, and we end up with this. Does anybody know what this one is called? No. That's another picture of the tabernacle. Okay, so that's vaguely what it would look like. Really big tent. Okay, there's the Holy of Holies. You see the Ark of the Covenant inside. That was where God was said to dwell. Although it does say in the Bible that it's not like the Lord was contained in there in a house as if you put God in a box. Although we sometimes try it day by day, don't we? Anyway, next picture, if you would. Fast forward 500 years. What's that called? The temple. And the temple, if I suppose the tabernacle was sort of like a mobile tent-like temple. The temple was built, and it was built with a similar sort of pattern. I think that one is Herod's temple, not Solomon's temple, but you get the idea, with the same sort of big doors, big walls, then a Holy of Holies in there. And for those of you who don't know, when they would build a big building like this, same as if they used to build a big building anywhere in the UK or beyond, they would have something that set the shape for the rest of it. It's called a cornerstone, and we'll come back to that in a minute. But the thing that I want you to see is that God was always building his presence in the midst of his people. That's his plan, is that his people would experience and know his presence. He chooses to be present. And then Jesus came, the ultimate presence of God. So much so that Jesus was described as tabernacling with us in John's Gospel. God in his very person comes and dwells in the midst of his people personally. And then Jesus goes to the cross to pay for our sin. He goes into a tomb. He is raised 3 days later and he ascends to heaven. What then? Are we distanced from God forever? Where does God dwell now? How does God dwell near his people? And the shock that Peter, in this little bit of the Bible that we've had read to us today, can't get over himself, is that the answer is God dwells in his people by his Spirit. He is in you and me and us together if we are believers here today. He dwells in his church. In fact, let's read that little bit of the Bible again together. Chapter 2, verse 4. As you come to him, the living stone, rejected by men but chosen by God and precious to him, you also, like living stones, because he's in us, are being built into a spiritual house. That's the picture here. To be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. So if much of what we say about the gospel message is this is what Jesus has done for you, Today's message is, this is what God is doing with you. If you're a Christian here today, you are being built into the presence of God, and you can't do it on your own. It's together. And this is really quite shocking, I found. I found it quite convicting personally, because sometimes I have conversations with people who aren't yet believers. They say, well, if I could just see God. And I feel really embarrassed. Because I have to say, in line with this bit of the Bible, there he is. And who am I pointing at? Us! Sometimes we're not the best adverts, are we? And yet the promise here is that where God's people are, that is where he is dwelling on earth in the here and now. And Peter is saying that when a Christian enters the room, there's a sense in which God is entering the room. That's why in the Bible where God says, doesn't he, make that promise, where 2 or 3 are gathered, there I am in their midst. Have you got any idea how important in God's plans, in his building plans, we are together to him? And we're going to look at this just for the remaining time today, but before we do this, I just need to say how hard I find this. Peter needed to shout this and yell this to the people that he was writing to in the first century because they were finding it hard too. Because there are things that distract us. I forget God's building plan. I get back to my own building plan, or I look around for a building plan for my life and what I want to spend my time, energy and effort doing. I need to be constantly reminded of this because I've got some sort of spiritual amnesia. I just forget so easy. Can I tell you, if we read verse 9 together, look at verse 9 together. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people belonging to God. Does all of that sound important? Of course it does. Did you forget it this week? Of course you did. You wouldn't have done half the things you did. You wouldn't have got stressed about half the things you got stressed about, or angry about half the things you got angry about, or felt bad about half the things you felt bad about if you remembered that. But we forget it, don't we? And that's why Peter is shouting it at us. You and I, we can be deeply persuaded on a Sunday morning and then we go out somewhere else and we just get assaulted with other building projects. And so I walked into an airport departure lounge earlier this week and I just thought, I'm going into an airport departure lounge. Nothing unusual, nothing dangerous about that. And suddenly, bang! I'm walking straight through the duty-frees and coming at me are people handing me free samples of this and smellies of that. And of course they're all models because that's the way that the people get you to buy stuff. They all look really pretty. And so I'm trying to walk through and remember, I belong to God here. I don't want any of this stuff. I'm not defined by the junk that I carry around in my pocket. Then I carry on going through and there's all these big billboards with really wonderful, pretty people then as if to say, be like me. Build your life on things that I'm building my life on. And then I keep walking through and there are all these fancy shops. They're playing really cool music and they've got all these gadgets that are really interesting and not boring like reading the Bible, but they're gadgets and they seem to actually do stuff. And I just want to get on the plane! And I'm not the only one who's been assaulted by a whole stack of other building plans this week, am I? You see, when we forget God's building plan, we don't default to no building plan. We'll build our lives on something else. So we're going to see 3 things in this text, 3 vitally important things that Peter says, you need this rattling around your head, otherwise you'll go somewhere else. And the 3 things were very simple. Stick us that. There we go. 3 things. What he's building us on, you need to remember that, or another way of saying that is what is our cornerstone. Okay? Second of all, what he's building us into, or another way of saying that is what is our identity. Number 3, what he's building us for, or what we are to do. Okay? Now, if you're somebody here who's not yet decided whether you want to trust in Jesus, this is a great place to be. And this is a great place to start because it's saying, what are you going to build your life on? What does that make you? And what will you do as a result of it? Could not be plainer. Okay? So, I might not get to all 3 points. If I'm running short of time, and we'll miss the 3rd one off because it gets taken up in the rest of the letter anyway. But first of all, here we go. What's he, that's God, building us on? Or what is our cornerstone? He tells us here in these verses what we all know, which is what I've just said, which is every life is about building. We're all doing it, all of us. We all take after God in that sense, building for something in the future. But I need to give you the details again. I need to teach you some building techniques, so particularly if you're utterly disinterested, listen anyway, okay? This is Kosh's job. He does architecture and all that kind of stuff and buildings engineer. What's your job? What do you do? He builds stuff, okay? Good, he builds stuff. Good. Now, before they had lasers-guided plumb lines to get buildings straight and all that kind of thing, what they would do is they would go and hunt in a quarry. If you were going to build a building, you would hunt for a cornerstone, a bit like a foundation stone. It would have to be one without any marks or brokennesses or faults in it. It was to be the foundation. It would set the shape for everything. It would carry the weight. It would hold things together. It would hold everything else up. Now, if you chose the right cornerstone, your building stood the test of time. It would endure. You pick the wrong cornerstone, it's just a disaster waiting to happen. Buildings control will just be at you, and the whole thing would crumble. But it was difficult sometimes to spot the right cornerstone. You had to know what you were looking for. Sometimes it could look weak, but it would hold everything else up. And the announcement that we have here in 1 Peter that was shouted and told 700 years before this, so he's quoting out of the Old Testament, a promise that God made, is that God announces to the nation of Israel, listen you lot, you've been building all right, but you've been building away from me. You've been building against me. You're idiots. And the whole thing's about to all come crumbling down. That's why life hurts. That's why disaster keeps coming. And worse than all of that, if those are just like the symbols and the evidence that there is something wrong, sooner or later you're going to have to stand before me. And you will be put to shame on that day if you've built your life on anything other than what I say you should build your life on. You're lost, Israel. In fact, he announces that, doesn't he? But that's not all he announces. Look down at verse 6 and 7. This is God speaking. See, I lay a stone in Zion, a chosen and precious cornerstone, and the one who trusts in him will never be put to shame. So what's he doing? He's making an announcement. He's saying, I'm going to intervene. I'm going to step in. I am going to lay the ultimate cornerstone, the thing for you to build your life upon. Can I tell you about it? I'm so excited, he says. It's precious. It's a chosen one. It's the only one that can actually carry the weight, not just of your life, but of the lives of if necessary, the whole world. If everybody should turn to this cornerstone. In fact, it's a he, it's not an it. When he comes, he will be able to take and bear the weight of your expectation. He will be able to give you shape. He will be able to hold you up. He will be my choice. He is what you need, and he is precious to me. What's his name? Jesus. Don't ever get tired of thinking about Jesus as the cornerstone. He is God's chosen, precious cornerstone. The one on whom every life on planet Earth should be built. Build it on anything else, calamity is just round the corner. It will crumble. God has promised it. What are you building on today? What are you building on? But what did they do, Israel, when they got this news? What did the religious leaders, what did the people do? Well, verse 4 and 7 tells us. Verse 4. As you come to him, the living stone, what happens? What's that first word? Rejected. Look at verse 7. Now, to you who believe, this stone is precious, but to those who do not believe, the stone the builders, what? Rejected, has become the capstone, cornerstone, foundation stone. So here, God offers something up and says, this is what you're supposed to build your life on. And what happens? He gets rejected. That's what the religious leaders of Israel did again and again. You see, they wanted to build their life just like everybody else. All of us, we all build our life on something. But what we do is we look at Jesus and we say, well, I want to build my life on this and this and this. And if I build my life on Jesus, it will get in the way. I want to build my life on my education. And my plan to make my life goals happen the way I want them to do. And if I turn to Jesus, that won't work, so reject Jesus. I want to build my life on getting power and control in the situations that I face, or getting notoriety, or getting a bit of fame. And if I turn to Jesus, who appears weak at first glance, I won't be able to go there, so I'm sorry, I'm rejecting Jesus. I want to build my life on getting the right life partner. I'm going to get a spouse who will be my saviour, and if I just get that person to know me and love me, then I will feel whole. Yeah, good luck with that. I'm going to build my life on my kids. I'm going to spend all my time and all my energy And the focus of my affection and my attention will be to give them the future that I think they should have. And suddenly they leave the house, or they make poor choices, and you're destroyed. So what we have here is people who say, I know better than God. That cornerstone isn't much good for the building that I want to build. Reject. And that's what happens. In fact, it's stronger than that, isn't it? It says, no, it's offensive to me. The idea that God would want to step into my life and tell me how I should be building. I can be my own cornerstone. How dare you tell me that I need you to save me, God? So really today, this morning, the question for all of us today is simple. Who are you going to believe? Who are you going to believe? Are you going to follow the model of Israel? Or that model repeated again and again and again in people that we know, even perhaps our own life? We've not really got a good track record of building for ourselves, have we? Or are you going to believe what God says? I've picked you a chosen cornerstone, delivered, perfect, just what you need. He is the only one who can hold your life up. Not religion, not a 10-step plan. He's not an object. He's not a strategy. He's a person, a living stone. He's the only one you can rest your life on. He's the only one who can carry your weight. I promise you this, says God in verse 6. You won't be dropped. You won't be put to shame. If you build your life on Him, He will never, ever fail you. So others come and say, this is the Saviour. No, He's not. This is the one to build your life on. No, I'll find my own way. This is the most precious thing that God has to offer. No, He isn't. And people end up just getting in the way of God's plan. So what do we do about that? What do we say to people when they say, Jesus isn't the thing to build on? Well, we lovingly and we graciously come to people and we say, please, 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 look again at Jesus. But Peter here wants us to know that when people reject, that won't get in the way of God's purpose. It won't. Spurgeon, great Baptist preacher, just like another one you may be familiar with, said to his congregations in 1856, he who would place himself in front of a fast-moving railway car will be crushed and would be just as foolish as you who are opposing the gospel. If the gospel is true, remember that truth is mighty and must prevail. Who are you to attempt to stand against it or him? You will be crushed. But let me tell you, when the railway car runs over you, the wheel will not be raised even an inch by your size. For what are you? A tiny gnat, a creeping worm, which that wheel will crush to less than nothing and not leave you even a name as having ever been an opponent of the gospel. Let all the infidels in the world know assuredly that the gospel will win its way, whatever they do. Poor creatures. Their efforts to oppose the gospel are not even worthy of our notice. And we need not fear that they can stop the truth. They are like a gnat who thinks he can quench the sun. Go, tiny insect, and do it if you can. You will only burn your wings and die. Likewise, there may be a fly who thinks it could drink the ocean dry. Drink the ocean if you can. More likely, you will sink in it, and it will drink you. What does this mean for you and me? Jesus is the cornerstone and cannot be beat. Come to him now when you can. Quickly. We're not messing. We're not messing. So why has Peter put this here? Why is he having to tell us what he's building, what God is building his building on? I think there's two quick things, and then I'll move on to the next point. The first one is in verse 4. Can you see the very first words of verse 4? As you come to him. Which in the original it's a present continuous, so it's a bit more like, as you keep coming to him. My question for you today is, have you done that? Remember, when we become believers, we don't say, right, tick, Jesus done that, and move on with the rest of our life. What we do is daily, regularly, we choose what building project we're going to go to, where we're going to put our weight. My question for you today is, are you coming to him daily? He doesn't send you to do a list of rules. He says, first thing in the morning, come to me. Otherwise, you're not going to build on me. That's not rocket science, is it? So please, I think the Lord's smiling on this. You might not like it, but he's smiling on it. Get a hold of it and use it. Don't you dare go thinking that you're going to be able to build on him if the only dose of him you get is on a Sunday morning. Oh, come on. That's it's not common sense. That's not common sense. The common sense is you keep coming to him. I need him, otherwise I'll be distracted. I'll need him, otherwise I'll build on the Casey model of building. And the Casey model of building leaves an awful lot to be desired. I can say that about the Fisher model of building, and the Campbell model of building, and the Langton model of building. Unless I'm coming to him, I'm going to build on those foundations, and it won't last for long. That's why some of you have got eyes like this, because you're worn out trying to build your plans. He doesn't call us to go to a scheme, or even a building. He calls us go to him. You can go to him. You need to. Second of all, I think we've got this bit to remind us, telling us what we've got to build on. The reason we're being told that is so we can be ready to expect rejection. Be ready to expect rejection. So that's what a lot of these verses are telling us here, aren't they? Sometimes it's easy when you look at the low numbers in here, you think, hold on, there's 12,000 people in Speak and there's about, 60 of us in here, if that. Are we doing something wrong? Do we need to be offering people a new experience? Do we need a new and better preacher? Probably. You're very welcome, Anthony. We've waited a long time. Do we need better music? Do we need this? Is that it? And what he's telling us here is verse 8. Look at verse 8. It's so powerful. And a stone that causes men to stumble and a rock that makes them fall, they stumble because they disobey the message, which is also what they were destined for. People will bump into Jesus and want to get as far away from him as possible. That won't stop God's plans. Now I just want to talk about something very difficult and theological for a second, because it's incredibly important to a number of you as you've been speaking to me recently. Here we have a verse that tells us they will stumble because they disobey the message, which is also what they were destined for. Some of you in here are terribly worried about some of your relatives who've not put their trust in Jesus. Some of you have got a burning passion to pray, sometimes with tears, for your friends. What are you supposed to make of a verse like that? Or if you're somebody here today and you're tempted to say, well, I was destined to not follow Jesus, so I'm okay, I can keep quiet. What are we to make of that? Well, it's very heavy, and I just want to bring you 4 comments on it, okay? So somebody who's sitting there and thinking to themselves, am I chosen by God? You need to realise that, or do I have a hope of being chosen by God? You have to realise that this verse is a focus that is directed on the end of time. Do you see that? So we're told at the end of time there will be people who have rejected. But the focus of the New Testament, the focus of these verses is today is what matters. Don't ask the question of, am I saved then? What you do is you answer the question of today. Have I turned and put my trust in Jesus today? All of the New Testament calls for a response. So now is the time to say, actually, I need to pick up this cornerstone of Jesus and have a look again. So if you're somebody here who hasn't trusted in Jesus, today is a great day to look at him. Pick him up. Have a little look. Look at his grace, his mercy. Look at the truthfulness of his resurrection. Look at his gracious authority. Look at the salvation and forgiveness he offers. Look at the Son of God and say, no, today I really need to grab a hold of this. Because it's only then will we know. Perhaps you've been banging your head up against people who said, no, 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 no. Don't give up. That's the first thing to say. The second thing is, we need to remember that God is gracious and generous. He wants us all to be impacted by his grace. In fact, in Peter's next letter, we're told that the reason God has not come back and brought the final day of reckoning and judgment is so that more people can decide for him. That is his orientation. That's what he's doing. He's being gracious. So again, I'd say to you, if you are really worried about your family, then today is the day to go and remind them about Jesus. And it could be that in the Lord's economy, he has held off Judgment Day just so you can do that. Is there somebody who needs to put their trust in Jesus here today? If you do, perhaps we'll get to go to heaven tomorrow because you decided Jesus today. Wouldn't that be good? If you're not decided, look again, trust in him today, lay hold of him, because that's what today is for. Thirdly, and this is a really strange one, but I want you to think about it. God can ordain something not pleasing to him because he knows finally it will bring a greater good. Now, because Catherine is blonde, I'm going to say that again. Okay? She had this very pained look at either that or you're about to pass wind. Okay? This sort of look on her face. Let me say that again, okay? God can ordain something not pleasing to him because he knows finally it will bring a greater good. Can anybody give me an example? Can anybody give me an example? On the most horrific day planet Earth has ever seen, where the full viciousness and cruelty of humanity and defiance of God exploded just outside of Jerusalem, on that day, what day do we call it? Good Friday. Because there God was achieving a salvation beyond what anybody... They looked at that and thought, what's God doing? I doubt his character and goodness. And in that moment he was saving billions. And fourthly, this bit of the Bible tells us we're responsible for our own choices. To obey is a real choice. God has dignified you and me with a choice, and it is a real choice, so use it well, please. God is not out of control. He is building us on Jesus as our cornerstone. What are you building on today? Are you building your life on Jesus? Please do. Are we, as a church family together, building our hope on Jesus? I'm telling you, we're not going to get to point 3, so let's do point 2 and finish. Point 2, what's he building us into? Or what is our identity? Verse 9, I love this one. I've already read it because I couldn't hold it back in. I need to say it. In fact, somebody read verse 9 for us, please. Nice and loud. Read verse 9 out for us. We'll have a drink. Thank you for reading that. And we need to hear that again. I wouldn't normally say, cut this out of the Bible, put it on a photocopier, blow it up, stick it to your fridge. Okay? Get a knife and cut it into the underside of your eyelids. Put it on you and get it memorized. Get it learned. Because just as I'm tempted to build myself on stuff other than Jesus, I'm tempted to forget who he has made me and get my identity wrong. Put simply, you can't live all for him unless you daily embrace who you are in him. I'll say that again. Not you, let's do it corporate. That's how it is in this passage, it's corporate. We can't live all for him unless we daily embrace who we are in him. That's why Steve gets on the phone and on the text messages saying, you better get to church. This is not about Steve trying to put people in pews. This is about the fact that God has made us to together express our identity. And if you're not doing that, you're being disobedient. You're saying, I know better than you. I'll create my own identity. I'll do Jesus and me. That's not here. Not here at all. So my question is, what are you building your identity on? Or what do you see? Are you embracing other people writing an identity over you? Can I tell you, we do this day in and day out. Let me give you 3 examples, and there are more, 3 examples of how we can sometimes let another identity other than what Christ has done be written over us. Here's one. You say, I am my past. I did some stuff and it's still hanging over me. I can't shake it. It keeps coming back. It keeps shaping the way I feel about life and where I'm heading with my life. Or some of you say, I am my past. Someone did something to me. That church, that family member, that situation, that betrayal, I can't get past it. It shapes the way I do relationships now. It shapes the way I think about who God is. I am my past. Another identity that we take a hold of is, I am my performance. I was brought up to work hard, good old Protestant work ethic. I was raised that way. I had to be perfect. I had to do right. When I don't do right and things don't go to plan, I get waves of guilt coming all over me. I try so hard. People think I've got it all together, but I'm on a treadmill, and it feels like at any moment I'm going to drop the ball. That sound familiar to half of you? At least a couple of you are honest enough to nod your head. I'm my past, I'm my performance. What about this? I am my problems. One thing after another, a health problem, a people problem, a money problem, drama. I'm not pretty enough, my wife's always nagging and on the case, my kids are a disappointment. One problem after another. It seems as if my problems are all I can ever see. Do these sound familiar to you personally, to people you know? I'm my past, I'm my performance, I'm my problems. And when you keep trying to live out of those, the devil wins. He just wants to get you to forget all that Christ has done to change that. Now those things are not unimportant, but you make them into an identity and you're going to be squished. Peter knows it. Peter knows, and it comes out in this letter, and we haven't got time to dig into it, that those issues are issues that the people he's writing to are facing. And so he, rather than just pretend they're not there, he just says, look, you need to see who you are in Jesus. You need to see who you are. You need to see what he has done for you. Otherwise you will live under the writing of those things. Peter decides, and he was all of those, by the way, Peter. He chooses to decide to believe what God says about him. And all that God says about him, I mean, those things that we just had read in verse 9, they're all things that describe Jesus. Jesus is, verse 9, the chosen people of God. He is the royal priest. He is the holy nation. He is the possession, the people belonging to God. He is all of those, and he says that because you're in me, because you're mine, because you've built your life on me, and you're attached to me by faith, all the things that are true of me are now the defining things that are true of you, believer. That's what he says. So very quickly, let me rattle through these four, okay? Where is it? Right, first of all, you're a chosen race. So think of the nation of Israel. They were called and chosen, but got smug and thought they were chosen because there was something cool about them. And you know the temptation of this. You said, along with Israel, when Israel said to the Lord, so Lord, why did you choose us then? Was it because we're dead strong and big? No, you're one of the smallest nations. Was it because, we're righteous? We're so righteous and good? No, you're a stiff-necked and stubborn people. Or is it because of our awesomeness? Because we're awesome? No, you're a waste of time and you're incredibly high maintenance. Would that work with my wife, that approach? She says, tell me, what made you love me? Was it my brains? Yeah, right. Was it my beauty? Or the other one, love? I'd get punched, wouldn't I? The Lord says, I love you because I love you. Can I tell you, that makes you totally secure. Because the reason for him choosing you does not sit in you. If it sat in you, you'd be utterly insecure. But if the reason for him choosing you is in him, then you are as safe as houses. Because unlike you, he's faithful. Unlike you, he is true. Unlike you, he is committed. Unlike you, he's reliable. You are a chosen race. You're safe. And it is this choice of God that we must allow to define who we see ourselves as primarily. Can I tell you that if you're a chosen race or a chosen people, you are more defined by what God has done than your colour, than your accent, than your financial status, than your background. And here's the one that we don't like in Speak, than your family. This identity trumps everything. Not that those things are insignificant, but this one trumps it. You now have more in common with a one-legged tramp from Bangalore who knows Jesus than you do with your own daughter who doesn't. Now, I've got 6 daughters. Who are you? You're a chosen people. Second of all, you're a royal priesthood. You see that? A royal priesthood. And the key thing about priesthood you need to remember is one word. Access. Access. Do you remember them pictures? Could you get in by pushing the doorbell? No. Could you get in the temple by wearing the right clothes? No, you couldn't. You've got no access. Here we have access to God in a way that others don't through Jesus. Don't you ever forget that. For thousands of years they kept building that blinking tent saying, I wish I could get inside to be near God. Could they? All the wishing in the world wouldn't make it so. But through Jesus, the one who he tore the temple curtain, remember, top to bottom, massive big thing, access open to God, and this isn't for a select few. You are a nation, a royal priesthood, all of us. So whatever your surname is, whatever your background is, we get access. You don't need to come to Steve the pastor. You don't need to go to Anthony the pastor. You don't need to go to some dude to give you confession. You've got access to God through Jesus Christ. He has made us all a royal priesthood. So we represent God to people, and then we represent people to God as we pray. Now, there were only a few in the Old Testament, but now there are a nation. We've got access. I was watching yesterday the Giro d'Italia, which is, cycling stuff. And there's sort of all the barriered off areas where all the teams go, and they do all their planning behind them so that none of the other plans can be seen. It's the same sort of thing as the Grand Prix that's on this afternoon, Spanish Grand Prix. You've got the pits, and if you want to get in, you need to have your badge. Otherwise you can't get in the pit lane, can't go near there, you don't get access. And the hoi-polloi people like you and me are like, wouldn't it be, well, if you like motor racing or cycling, wouldn't it be cool to go and find out what they were doing before they put the suit on? Wouldn't it be cool to find out what they do afterwards? What do they actually do at the after-race party? Who knows? Can't get in. But I get excited. I thought, wow, wouldn't that be cool? No. Not compared with this. You've got access to the throne room of heaven. Jesus is letting you into all his plans and purposes. You're a real royal priesthood. Next one, you're a holy nation. This is all about being distinct. Remember, we've learned over the last couple of weeks, the word holy simply means separate, separated, apart. And I know some of you feel different. You do, don't you? You know you love Jesus, and you're amongst a bunch of people who don't, and you feel a little bit different. Peter knew that too. He's about to write the rest of the few chapters to talk us through that. Can I encourage you not to reject that? Our instinct is when I feel different, try to be the same as everybody else. Sometimes we say as a church, how can we try to be as the same as everybody else? When here we're being told we're supposed to let our difference shine out so people can see who Jesus is and what he is like. We're supposed to be distinctive. And I thought a little bit about all the different ways in which different races are distinctive. Not all of them, but some of them. So I had to notice that Africans, we have some today, big shout out to Africans, they are known and distinctive for amazing levels of hospitality. They just pour shame on us Brits because they know how to offer hospitality properly. I was watching, like I said, the Giro d'Italia. The Italians, what are they marked for? They talk with their hands, don't they? They're all over the shop talking with their hands. They're brilliant. Scandinavians, what are they known for? Well, they've usually got sort of blonde hair, slightly tan skin, and they're very, very reserved and understated. Aren't they brilliant? Scottish people. Let's move on. So what is the distinctives of our nation? We're set apart for God. And I want to spend an hour telling you all the different ways, but you've got to wait for the next few weeks because that's what the next few weeks is all about. But it's just enough to say, you are a distinctive, holy, set-apart nation if you know Jesus. That's what we are. Fourth thing, quickly, and finishing it, here we go. God's special possession. And this carries the idea, what does it say there at the end of there? People belonging to God. We've got an ESV. ESV Bible translation. Do you want to read that for us, that little phrase? You see that? And the idea there, I understand, I'm not a Greek scholar, but I understand the idea behind the word is that it carries the idea of to embrace something and to enclose it and draw it near. So it's like wrap it up and keep it close to you. A special possession. Can I ask you what object or thing do you value most? And if you're self-deluded, ask the person you came to church with, they'll tell you. They'll tell you what it is. Think what it is. Okay? Whatever that most valued thing is, how much did it cost? Oh, it's expensive. Was it a family heirloom that cost somebody else a lot? What was it? What do you do with it? Like wave it around? No? Do you show it up? What do you do with it? How do you guard it? What do you do with it? How do you keep it safe? Now think for a second. We are God's treasured possession. According to this. We're his special possession. We were bought at a great price. Jesus Christ bled on a cross and died so that we could have that salvation. Whatever you've got, chicken feed compared to the price that Jesus paid for you. How does he guard us? He guards you utterly and totally. We are his special possession. And these little churches that received this letter from Peter, just like us, were being made to feel worthless, mocked and sneered at. They needed to know that Christ had made them his special possession. Do you believe that? Most of you sit here and think, I believe that for him or her sitting next to me. Don't you? If you're honest. I knew you'd admit, yeah. We all think that, yeah. So over there, You know, Sue's sitting there, and she said, yeah, it's true for me, Mum, but it's not true for me. Kosh is sitting there, and it's true, yeah, true, Trudy, she gets grace, but I have to work really hard because I'm a church elder. Nathan's just sitting there. Do you have any idea how precious you are in the sight of God through what Jesus has done? Please, could you take this verse and could you put it on your fridge? Memorize it. You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people belonging to God. So, Steve's going to get you to be active. We're going to say this together. Can we remember those 4 things? I'm going to test you next week, okay? You are ready, a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people belonging to God. Janice, what would you give that in marks out of 10? Give it a what, sorry? Well, the words, yeah, that's fine, okay, but the saying of it I'd give about... Should we try again, shall we, Janice? Okay, ready? You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people belonging to God, and that includes Fiona and Kosh and all of us, doesn't it? And that changes the way that you see and hear everybody here. This is the thing. This is who God is making us. He is building us into His special people who will shine and work for Him. This is how God sees us, as a treasured possession. These are not people in this room to be used and abused, but to be embraced and loved. We are family together. That is God's plan for your life. That is God's plan. That is what He is building us into. And so, as I promised, we're going to finish just there. And the rest of the 3 weeks is going to be what He's building us to do. And it comes up in verse 5, and it comes up in verse 9, that we may offer spiritual sacrifices, that we may declare the praises of Him. In other words, it's all done so He gets bigged up. So all the glory goes to Him. If you're somebody who's heard this today and says, I want to glorify God, tell me how to do it. And please, read ahead. Pray ahead. But for the moment, we're going to turn to the table once we've sung a couple of verses. And as we turn to that table, this that speaks of what Jesus has done, I want you to be picking out one of those things there. One of those things that Christ has declared for you, and turn it to the main thanksgiving point in your heart in a minute when we come to this. Let's stand and sing the first 2 verses together.